give us where you're from, and yeah, so I can see everybody for there's from Durban, Steffi from Durban. Um, there's Georgie Hine from London. How's it going, Georgie? Good, good, good. And there's David from the UK. Let's just give everybody a second to join. That's awesome. And see everybody. There's people from Germany, people from California. It's always fascinating to see where everybody's from all over the world to join us here for this webinar today. So just to give everybody a chance, we've got about 60 minutes with Dr. Demartini. My name is Emil van Biljon. I'm part of the team at the Demartini Institute. I'll be your MC for this evening. The topic for this inspiring webinar is the evolution of spiritual religiosity from myths to facts. The webinar is going to be running for about 60 minutes with Dr. Demartini, and we're also going to be having questions and answers included in that also. At the end of the webinar, we're going to have an exclusive offer with you, for you that you can join Dr. Demartini at his signature program, the Breakthrough Experience. So please be sure to stay until the end so that you can hear that exclusive offer. And then also, please, you should definitely take notes, and please make sure you quickly grab a pen and paper. If you don't have already, you're definitely going to take notes. And then we have a lot of students that they prefer the comments to be done. So if we start with the questions and answers, we will be shutting the comments down on the right hand side. But please keep asking the questions. I do still get them. And then also, if you maybe do cut out, we do have a replay also available of the webinar that is available for the next 7 days also. So please be sure of that. And then just to introduce myself, I've been working and studying with Dr. Demartini for the past 11 years. I've been privileged to see Dr. Demartini on a mission. He's dedicated his life, more than 48 years of his life, to studying human awareness and potential. He has read over 30,000 books in 250 different disciplines, and he's traveled over 8 million miles to share his research and wisdom with people all over the world. We are incredibly honored to have Dr. Demartini here. So if you guys are ready, I am ready. Dr. Demartini, are you there?
I am.
Super. Thanks for being here tonight or with us, Dr. Demartini.
Thank you. I'm in Houston, Texas, in my one of my offices here.
That's the first time I actually see offers. It's really inspiring to have you with us. So are you ready to go with the questions?
Ready to go. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so Dr. Demartini, we've collected all the questions from the people over the past few weeks. So the first one that we want to discuss is, so can we start at the beginning? Can you discuss the origin and the evolution of religion so that we can understand how it came about and how it has evolved into the many religions that we know today?
Real simple question. Just how the universe began in 5 minutes. Okay. From what I can tell, and I'm sure that as I learn more, this will be refined, but the first human beings that potentially lived on the planet, and I'm not going to, I have a 5-day course on how human beings came about, so I'm not going to go into detail on that, but the first human beings had what appeared to be low reflective awareness. And they were primarily in what we would call lower brain centers. They hadn't had a highly developed telencephalon, which is the most evolved part of the brain. And they were more kind of animal behavior, more of avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, avoiding predators, seeking prey, thinking. We still have that area of our brain today. We call it the amygdala. And it's a desire center, and it is trying to avoid predator and seek prey even today, avoid challenge, seek ease. And we have now a more advanced part of the brain, the telencephalon, that's involved in objective reason, which allows us to create the sciences that we have today and some of the philosophical thinking that we have today, and more abstract conceptualization, mathematics, and things of this nature. But originally, man had low reflective awareness and more impulses for pleasure and instincts from pain. And it was basically surviving. And out in surviving in the wild, in nature, anything in nature that it didn't understand, that was a mystery, and I'm going to use the term mystery, to its awareness, if it frightened it, it would try to avoid it. And what they found is there's an area of the brain in the parietal temporal frontal junction area that if you stimulate it with magnetic stimulation, it gives people an experience that they're communicating with some sort of a god, or a communication with something that's satisfying. And that area of the brain lights up when we're traumatized, challenged, oppressed, frightened, when we have torture, turmoil, trauma, terribles, anything that challenges our value system, it lights up. And we dissociate from that trauma and we create the opposite content in the brain from our experience in order to survive. And we know that that area of the brain, we can do that electrically and magnetically and stimulate that and give religious experiences to people. And but what has happened is whenever we're under trauma or tragedy, that area lights up and gives us a religious experience. So we now know literally the brain areas that light up when we're having what we think are spiritual experiences or religious experiences. And it appears that our first fears, very early fears, were thunder, lightning, rumbling of earthquakes, pounding of animals, being eaten by animals. Even before the animals and earth, we were frightened about what foods to eat. We know that alkaloids tend to be toxic, and sweets and sugars and carbohydrates tend to be edibles. And we had to learn from it. And what we found out in the religious development, the very earliest religions, according to Taylor and others, is animism, where we basically project our agenticity and our idea that everything's alive onto things, and we talk to it and try to communicate with it to try to protect us from the things that frighten us. So religion seemed to emerge as a compensation for phobias, fears. And we would propitiate the things that we'd be frightened of by talking to some sort of a animistic, you might say, agent that would then we would pray to protect us from that thing we were frightened by. And the earliest religion is geomorphic, and the earliest remnants of religion are in caves, in symbolic drawings. Neanderthals are supposedly the place where this is supposedly identified, but I think it's much earlier than that. I think it goes back. We have some indications at going back around 300,000 years, but 50,000 years, we definitely have strong indication of it. And of course, once we started having, we weren't nomadic, we actually started having where we started plant things and live in communities and things of this nature, we started having organized religion. But prior to that, we had sort of an animistic stage of religion and shamanistic stage of religion. And we basically had gods that we made up to protect us from the things we were frightened of. So we had geomorphic gods, then we had zoomorphic gods, which were plant-based, based on the plants that would kill us versus save our lives. Then there was zoomorphic, animal-based, and we had animal gods, because animals could kill us or frighten us. And eventually, when man became more frightening than the animals and the parts of nature, as we became solving these mysteries, and eventually anthropomorphic gods, and eventually astromorphic gods, which are basically things bigger, suns, moons, stars, and things of this nature. So what we did is we have a tendency in our amygdala, which is a primitive part of our brain, you might say, or subcortical part of our brain, better said. That area of the brain is involved in what is called false positives and subjective biases. So if we're out in the wild and we think we see some pattern or something moving in nature, we automatically animate it and give it an agent as if it's alive to protect us. We create pareidolia, which is the imposition of images that we think are alive. Just like if you look at wood or marble, you'll see images of faces of animals or humans in it. And that's a protective mechanism for, it's better to err on the false positive and assume something's there that's not there, to assume that a predator's there because he could eat us if we had a false negative, which means that we thought it wasn't there when it really was there. Better to err on the false positive where it's there even if it's not there, and that way we're prepared for it. So we had false positives, and we have subjective biases, and we had agenticity, and we animated things, assuming it was alive to protect us from something that might move, that might be a predator. And we saw patternistic, we saw patterns in behavior that we then assumed with pareidolia that was animated to protect us from something that might eat us, or protect us from something that might harm us. And then we had also the same thing for prey. We had a pareidolia, which is the seeing the faces and images of animals that we think are edible, and we would agenticity them and make them animated and alive. And this animism, this agenticity, is the first stage of religion, from what we can tell. It's so basically, in a summary, anything that frightened the earliest human beings that lived, um, anything that frightened them, the brain would dissociate from it and create content in the brain from its experience to counterbalance that phobia in order to survive, to keep the brain from going into full reaction. And then we would create false positives to assume that it's something that could harm us, to prepare for it, or something that would save us from it. And we now carry that forward into our religions today. The lowest level of religious development that we have today is reward and punishment religions. It's the bottom of the barrel. So we blame something on the outside that we think is frightening us. We personify it with agenticity. We create an image on it, which we may call the devil, for instance. And then we have this other side that we have agenticity on, and pareidolia. We'll personify that, and we'll give it a title that saves us. We'll put a father figure on it, or we'll put some sort of a savior figure on it, a prophet figure on this, or something that takes away our fear. And then because we'll subordinate to that thing that we think is going to protect us, we'll inject those values, and we'll try to live by those values that we project, that we've made in our mind. And then we've ended up creating these kind of pseudo gods or false gods, these anthropomorphic deities that the world has been basically infested with for, God, thousands of years now. Many of them have risen, and many of them are gone. In the Mayan culture, for instance, there was a rain god. When they were frightened of thunder, they had a thunder god and rain god, because they could flood and they could be struck by lightning. And so they would appease the gods by talking to the agent of that god to appease it, and try to give things and support its values so it wouldn't be angry, because they were perceiving these things as being angry gods, and they were frightened of these gods. But eventually we realized what thunder came from and what lightning came from, and when we did, those gods disappeared. And so these anthropomorphic and zoomorphic and gods and geomorphic gods are pretty well, most of them are gone except in undeveloped countries today, because we passed through that stage of development, and we now have solved mysteries with our questioning and reasoning and reflective awareness. And we realized that everything out there that frightened us had nothing to do with what's out there. It had everything to do with our perception of what's out there. And that's why I can take somebody who's frightened about something, and the breakthrough experience, for instance, and take it and dissolve the fear out of it, the phobia out of it, by finding the upsides to it. And instead of having to pray to something to protect it, there's nothing to protect. And so you don't need to have this artificial anthropomorphic deity to protect you from this artificial phobia that you have. So religion came as a protection for people who didn't know how to govern themselves, didn't have a higher brain function, that didn't know how to neutralize and balance their phobias and their philias. They had to create these constructs, and it was a necessary construct for the average person. There was not a lot of reason and a lot of understanding initially, so we had to migrate through these stages of moral development and spiritual development. But the lowest level of moral development is avoid predator, seek prey, avoid punishment, seek reward, avoid negative, seek good, positive, avoid evil, seek good, avoid the devil and seek the savior kind of thing, or the hero figure in mythologies. And that's the lowest level. The highest level of religious understanding as we go up in the brain development is the realization of objective reason. It's a mathematical equation that's balanced. The positives and negatives aren't imbalanced. You don't have prey that's all positive and predator that's negative. You have them integrated. And that's what objectivity is you see the balance of both. And it's the realization that there's a hidden order, a mathematical hidden order in the universe. And you could personify that and call it like the panpsychics have done throughout the ages, where you imagine the whole universe is intelligent, and the universe is trying to assist all living organisms to evolve. And the moment we see both sides, we maximally evolve. We know that maximum growth and development occurs at the border of support and challenge, or prey and predator. Imagine if you got prey without predator, you get fat and sluggish, and you'd end up being out of fitness. And if you had predator without prey, you'd get skinny and starve. But if you had prey and predator together, you maximally keep your fitness and you continue to grow. So the highest level of the brain is more objective. It's not frightened by negatives without positives. It's not philic and fantasizing by more positives without negatives and praying to some anthropomorphic deity to protect it. It integrates the two, and it realizes that it's not out there, it's inside you, and it's your perceptions. And the highest religious understanding is the realization that all pairs of opposites that are supportive and challenging are paired synchronously, and that you realize that there's a hidden order in the apparent chaos, and you actually have a feeling of love for that and an embracing of the order that's there. And so religion goes from the most polarized, avoid pain, seek pleasure, to the most synthesized, where you embrace both in the pursuit of some cause, some purpose in life, something deeply meaningful. The Stoics reference this, and many philosophers have said this, but religion is got through different stages. The most basic religion is basically avoiding trauma or something that frightens you and seeking something that saves you from that fright. That's why praying to a God to protect you from your fears is still carried over. It's kind of a childish development, but it's used. I always say that the highest prayer at the top is not protecting you and asking for things to change. It's basically acknowledging the hidden order that's there that you've been denying. I tell people those that are searching for a God the most are the ones denying the presence of the divine, the order of the universe the most. But when you actually see the order of the universe, there's nothing to protect yourself from. There's nothing to run from or seek or avoid. And whenever you're trying to change others to live in your values, or you're trying to change you to live in other people's values, you're going to have frustration and unfulfillment. You're going to want to kind of pray that something is going to change the repercussions of that frustration. So the highest prayer, if you will, is thank you. I love you, and I see the order, and there's nothing out of order, and I appreciate the way it is, as it is. Om Tat Sat, as the Gita used to say. But the bottom line is our religion developed anthropologically from our fear of nature and our evolution of what we were frightened of through time, from geomorphic to zoomorphic plants, zoomorphic animals, part animal, part human. You can see this in Egyptian writings and some other cultures, the Mayan cultures and other cultures. Eventually anthropomorphic, as you see in the Abrahamic religions. And eventually you honor the hero, but the real hero and the villain, when you actually merge them together, you get the true divinity. The true divinity does not build without destroy, or does not destroy without build, but transforms. I always say the master lives in a world of transformation, not in the illusions of gain and loss. And the masses want to avoid things. They want to get rid of things. They want to gain things. They want to avoid half of life. And so I'm not a promoter of that. It's a stage of moral development, as Kohlberg said. But Kohlberg said that you live avoiding pain, seeking pleasure. Then you live by subordinating to mothers, fathers, preachers, teachers. Then you live subordinating to convention and tradition of people in your neighborhood, community, city, state, nation, and then world. Then eventually you transcend that and realize that you transcend those moral things of good and bad and avoid and seek. And you realize that both are necessary in the journey. There's no hero and villain except what you have inside, and they're always together as a pair. And when you finally embrace that, you've got the true religiosity. As Einstein said, he's not interested in anthropomorphisms. He's not interested in artificial gods made in the image that create these moralities that we supposedly come from the gods, but actually come from humans made up, and then they make artificial gods to promote the ideals that they're living by. I'm interested in exploring the magnificence of the universe, seeing past the avoiding and seeking model, and seeing the synthesis and synchronicity of all things at the same time. And I think that's the highest religiosity we can obtain. And many times people dissociate and think that they're going to get somebody saving them, and somebody, as long as you're giving credit to something outside you and blame something outside you, you haven't got to true religiosity yet. That's my experience.
Thanks for that, Dr. Demartini. That leads us to the next question. Many people worry about death, and there's a fascination about what happens after death. I know that the Egyptians focus on the afterlife, and some people say they have seen the light when they've had a near-death experience. Others believe in the different forms of heaven and hell. There's all sorts of beliefs. What do you found in your research, and what's your thoughts and belief of what happens after death?
Well, I've been blessed to, since 1984, explore clinically with my method dealing with grief and dying. And then back in 19, gosh, this would have been 1975, 1976, I was down studying, I was down surfing down in El Salvador, and I came across this procession of a group of people that were celebrating a death of a mayor. And I was going, these people are celebrating and dancing and having a party. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. These people perceive him being freed from his body, and he's set free as a soul. And they were celebrating death. And then I saw people from Greek backgrounds who were wearing black for 2 years, and when somebody died, and they're mourning death. And I thought, isn't that interesting? The same exact process, complete opposite belief systems and the way they respond. And that put me on a journey. Is what is this fear of death and fear of life, and all the different theories about it. So I'm going to just summarize it this way: that my observation doing the Demartini method in the breakthrough experience and working clinically on 3,588 deaths now, I've yet to see a death without a transformation. I see that all the human behavioral traits that an individual displays or demonstrates when they die immediately surfaces in one or many people, male or female, close or distant, self or other, and I don't see a loss. I see a transformation. It's almost like energy is conserved and it's moved into a new form, and the information is now manifested in new forms. I really got to see that also when I was 14 in my life, when I started living on the streets and hitchhiking. I started noticing that other people started playing the role of my family, even though I wasn't clinically with my family or right there with my family. I was seeing other people playing the roles of it. And that made me pause and think, wow, I've got a new family showing up. It's changing form, and the world is just transforming. So what happens is, when in the Demartini method on side C, the grief process, which we're working on a book on right now, the moment a person feels the grief and loss of something, I go, so what specific trait, action, inaction do you perceive you lost as a result of that death when they died? And they'll say, oh, I miss their conversations, I miss their hugs, I miss their smiles, I miss their sense of humor, I miss this. And you'll find out it's always things that supported their values and didn't challenge them that they miss. And that's what they're grieving the loss of. And then I go, now, who is it that emerged the moment this person died, that emerged, that took on that role around you, including yourself? Who took on that role? And it's not hard. It's very simple. I do it very quickly every weekend. And I show them until it's quantitatively and qualitatively balanced. They see that there's a new form that's come on. And it's like shocking when they first go like, oh, I can't believe that I started taking that role. My brother took on that role. My father took on that role. My best friend took on that role. So what happened is, what supposedly was dead is now manifested in new form. The behavior is showing up in new form. Then I find the drawback of the original behavior to crack the infatuation they had, and then find the benefit of the new one, and then the grief is dissolved. It's very simple. The grief is dissolved in a matter of 2 hours or less, done, over with. And they realized that there was nothing but a transformation, and there was no loss. So then I realized, we can show evidence that all the behaviors that an individual displayed or demonstrated is immediately emerged in other people. And if I can demonstrate that, then we have to acknowledge that when somebody dies, at least some of their behavior is now manifesting in other people. And that's shocking to some people who've never seen it, but I do it every week, and I've got proof. They've done study now in Japan on it, and we've got a book coming out on it. But then we look carefully, we look at the physical body upon death. I think that unless you've gone through some sort of cremation, which then combusts it, you may put it in a sarcophagus, or you may put it in water, or you may put it with the birds, or whatever forms of funeral you have. Eventually that is recycled into the elements and put into other plants and animals and insects, or germs or bacteria or something like that. So your physical atoms are recycled. Your behavioral traits are recycled through other people. And by the way, if you have the opportunity to see who took it on, you'll find out that that's migrating and changing as the days and weeks go on. And I had this firsthand experience when my wife passed away. I got to see all the different behaviors she had, 139 of them, who took on all the roles. So I see no evidence of anything lost. I see the elements recycled. I see the organic material decomposed and recycled and used as food of life building for others. So life is now transformed from one individual now into many individuals of insects, animals, or whatever that eats it, consumes it. I see the gases released in the atmosphere and used and recycled. So the elements are recycled. The food is recycled to other animals. They have now life at the point of death. And I see the behavior of all the information transforming into other people. Now, there's some peculiar things that happens in the breakthrough experience when somebody does the Demartini method on somebody that died and has passed away. They have now interesting conversations with people at the end with surrogates that communicate and say things spookily that reminded them and resembled and almost verbatim of what the individual that was alive said. So now I think that there's one other component. So the atoms and molecules are recycled. The behavior collectively is recycled as energy and information. But it seems that the information that was loved and appreciated, which I call the superconscious mind, is also recycled. I'm not sure exactly what language we want to use. There's various languages for it. Some people call it the noosphere. Some people call it a heaven, which just means sky or skyward. But it appears that the information that is loved and appreciated, that is communicated as love and appreciation, is also accessible even after death. And I've done that thousands and thousands of times. And somebody who's never seen that, it's worth seeing the breakthrough experience and catching that, watching it live. It's quite profound. I had a 11-year-old girl one time be the surrogate for a 57-year-old woman who had done her mother, who had passed away, who was 76. And when we got the surrogate, the 11-year-old girl got picked as the surrogate for the 76-year-old woman. And when she played the role of it, she started having a palsy in the left hand and started saying things that only the mother of this 57-year-old woman knew. And it spooked the room out because she had access to information that we don't know where she got it. But it was the information, it was the nicknames, it was the movements, it was behaviors, it was the memories of what that lady had. And it was all tears of gratitude and love demonstrated. It wasn't emotional, but it was very tearing and very heart-opening. So I have a feeling that everything that we've equilibrated in our mind and brought into objectivity, that is actually put into perfect equilibrium, and I call loved, seems to be stored in a superconscious mind, the best way I can call it, a panpsychic superconscious mind that could be in a domain that transcends our senses here. We could call that heaven if you want. We could call that accessible through incarnation if you want. That's fine. But then the human behavior, the behavioral traits that we tend to judge in people and in like and dislike seem to be conserved right here on the planet. And the physical molecules seem to be recycled into the elements. So I have a feeling that all those things can be accounted for and demonstrated. The only thing is the transcendental mind, the part that stores its love and wisdom. I can't say I have a suspicion of where its domain is, but I have a feeling that it's a domain that's at a higher concentric sphere than what our senses identify. But it's definitely there. I've seen it too many times. I've taken too many hundreds of people through the process, the Demartini method, and had them communicate with people that have passed away. And spookily, I had 6 chiropractors up in, I think it's Kitchener, Ontario, where we did B.J. Palmer, who is the son of the founder of chiropractic, and we read a lot of his books and summarized it and did the Demartini method on him, and then had 6 chiropractors do the method simultaneously on BJ. I got to play the surrogate role, and it was amazing. I don't even know where and how I got the information, but I was just kind of bringing out information to these guys in a dialogue when they were asking questions, and it was very, very cool. And if you've not seen such a thing, you kind of wonder where is that coming from? But I have a feeling that there's what Vladimir Vernadsky, the Soviet scientist who wrote the biosphere, described as the noosphere, and Teilhard de Chardin, who talked about it in his Phenomenon of Man, called it the noosphere. I have a feeling there really is a noosphere, a domain, a transcendental domain, just like the internet cloud, we call it today, that has information that we don't see, but it's accessible through a computer, but we have to access it through an equilibrated mind, a state of grace. And if we're in a state of grace, we access it. You can't access it through emotion, but you can access it through a perfectly equilibrated mind. And that information is, I think it's the immortal part of us. if you will.
And then Dr. Demartini, many people subscribe to the idea of the soul. Do you think we have a soul, or how does it fit into what you just explained now? Um, you know,
Well, I just find the soul in breakthrough as the frequency of individuation and differentiation out of infinite oneness. And what does that mean? That means if I were to take a picture of you in the infrared, I'd see a big blob of heat around you, like a thermography. If I took a picture of you in the visible spectrum, I'd see what I see with my eyes right now. If I took a picture of X-ray, I would penetrate you and I'd see bones that are white, muscles that are gray, and lungs that are black. If I developed the film. If I took gamma frequency, which is higher than X-ray, it's more penetrative. You'd start to disappear. You wouldn't show anything. You just see nothing. If I took very mid-range gamma, you wouldn't show anything at all, and the room and the table and the floor starts disappearing. If I go to high gamma, most everything starts disappearing. It penetrates right through everything. And if I go all the way to infinite frequency, there's nothing existing. I just get to the essence of being. Nothing exists. So if I go to high enough frequency, if I could actually attune and have a sensory apparatus that would identify at that frequency, nothing would be perceived. But if I then come back down from infinite frequency where there's just essence of being, I eventually come to a point where I start to differentiate something and individuate you. And Max Planck called this a frequency that has a wavelength of 1.6 times 1.6.16 times 10 to the negative 44 centimeters. This is a wavelength, a very small wavelength that differentiates nothingness from somethingness and self versus other than self. And we could call that the soul. It was Aristotle in his book On the Soul, about the fourth paragraph in his text. He said that the soul was a quantum with qualia. And anything that is longer in wavelength than the soul would be existential. It would be things in existing would be judged as something self versus other, which is the mind. And anything that's at that frequency or above would be essence. So somewhere in between there, I like to think of as that as the state of frequency of the mind, where we see both sides of things basically at a synthesis, and we don't judge, we transcend the judgment. So I like to think of the soul as a state of unconditional love, where we are not attracted, not repelled, not seeking, not avoiding, not looking for prey, not avoiding predator. There's no judgment, there's just poise. And it's that junction that we'll call soul. And my breakthrough experience, for practical purposes, I say that anytime we have a perfectly equilibrated mind, we're accessing the state of unconditional love, S-O-U-L, it's the soul. And this is the highest frequency when we have a synthesis of synchronous of opposites. It's the highest frequency that if we were to get to that frequency and stay in that frequency, we'd probably shatter into a trillion atoms, and we'd be a very high frequency state. So I tend to think of that as the soul. But various people have different terms for the soul. Some people call it the spirit, the breath. The pranayama Eastern Indian mystics saw that as a balance of inhalation and exhalation. They did it through pranayama and they accessed the soul. Some did it through meditation, where the conscious and unconscious are joined together, accessing the soul. If you're infatuated with something, you're conscious of the upsides, you're unconscious of the downsides. You resent something, and you're conscious of the downsides and unconscious of the upsides. These are emotions which are down in the mind, which are basically judging and weighing you down into the underworlds, which we could call the hell. And the second we end up seeing both sides synchronously, and not trying to avoid one and seek the other, but actually embrace both of them, maximum true religiosity, as I called it a moment ago, we now have soul. And we see both sides synchronously. And in the breakthrough experience, in the Demartini method, I'm attempting to give you an experience of the soul, an experience of an unconditional love moment, a condition where you're not seeking or avoiding. You're not conscious and unconsciously split, but you're fully conscious, your true mindful state. The mystics that talk about mindfulness, the method leads you to. The state that Jung described about taking conscious and unconscious and merging together, the principle and the method takes you to. The state of unconditional love, the method takes you to. The place where the physical senses no longer sense, which are in contrast and judging, and you're in a mystical state, it takes you to. So I'm a firm believer that soul is a obtainable state, but not a sustainable state. We don't live there consciously, or because we keep dividing things up into conscious and unconscious half, but we have the capacity to experience it. And I always say, every time you do the method, you get a glimpse of the soul. and your intuition is attempting to get you in that state, and your impulse and instincts are trying to take you out of that state. So you're in basically a kind of a gathering, a refining system between your intuition integrating things and your impulse and instinct separating things. And they create judgments which put you in hell, you might say, the underworlds, which is because if you're infatuated with something, you're trying to change you relative to them, which is futile, that's hell. And if you're resentful to something, you're trying to change them relative to you, which is futile, which is hell. But when you just love something as it is, and you expand your sphere of awareness and transcend the judgments, you're in what is called the sky, the noosphere. You're in the love state, and you end up having the immortal soul's message, the inspiration of the soul, if you will.
And Dr. Demartini, what is your interpretation of God? What is God?
Well, I've sort of described that a bit on the first question. We have anthropomorphic deities, geomorphic deities, zoomorphic deities, which are personifications, animations of patterns that we've animated in nature, and we've given it a God's name. But these are basically false gods that are used to mitigate, you might say, our phobias and our fears. And most religions are basically utilizing these phobias and these fears in order to govern and control people that don't have control over themselves. But the real divinity, in the way I look at it, the real intelligence or intellect of the universe is more panpsychic. I guess I would classify myself as a panpsychic. More fundamental than space, time, energy, and matter is consciousness. And consciousness, if it is integrated, makes energy, and if it's polarized, it creates matter, and therefore space and time. And so I think that the real true divinity, if you will, or source of our essence and existence would be the perfect synthesis and synchronicity of opposites, the matrix of the pair of opposites that are available to us at all times. In the breakthrough experience, I do columns, when I do the Demartini method on Saturday afternoon, I do columns 6 and 13. This is extremely profound. It's the greatest discovery I've made in 47 years of study. And I discovered that with every perception, whatever you're perceiving in the moment sliver of time that you're perceiving it, the equal and opposite perception is always there. And you were conscious of one and unconscious the other. But if I ask proper questions and access where it was, when it was, the content, the context, and who it was to, this behavior, I can find out where the opposite was at the same time. And when you're fully conscious of both of them at the same time, you access the hidden order in the apparent chaos. You find something to love that you thought you judged, and you actually access this panpsychic intelligence that's actually maximizing growth. So I'm a firm believer that our physiology, psychology, sociology, and theology is all trying to get us to our most objective state, which is us living by our highest values, where we're seeing both sides equally at the same time. And we have pure objective wisdom. And we're not polarized in our perceptions and judging things as seeking and avoiding with our impulse and instincts. We're just graced. And the intelligence of the universe is striving to help us live there. And I believe that there really is a panpsychic intelligence, a magnificence of the universe that's attempting to live, to help all living organisms maximize its growth, and particularly humans with their transcendental awareness to be able to see it. And it's not something you have to have faith in or belief in. It's something you can demonstrate reproducibly as a science and have a mystical or spiritual experience doing it. So I'm a firm believer that that's the universe is actually, it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have an image. It's not limited into anthropomorphisms or zoomorphisms. It transcends all of that. It encompasses everything because nothing's excluded in it. And it's there. And in breakthrough, I try my best to give people on Saturday night the ability to glimpse it. And if they just do it, I have another program I call synchronicity for the sake of making sure that they do that hundreds and hundreds of times in their life so they can't question it. They just know. I want them to know it. I don't want them to have faith. I don't want them to have belief. I don't want them to guess. I don't want them to be subordinating to some paradigm somebody told them so and to not think for themselves. I want them to be able to demonstrate reproducibly a realization of the synthesis and synchronicity of opposites and perceptions and be fully conscious and get a glimpse of this soul's awareness of this panpsychic intelligence that's permeating the universe, that's allowing life to evolve. That to me is As Albert Einstein said, it's enough for me on a daily basis to explore and to try to penetrate a few of the main mysteries of the universe each day. And he was interested in that, but he wasn't interested in any zoomorphic or anthropomorphic deities. Those are confines set based on our fears. It transcends it. This divine intelligence, if you will, or intellect, doesn't have phobias and philias. It doesn't. It's just a synthesis of synchronous of opposites. It's an acausal synchronicity of opposites that's available. It's beyond the Tao. It's beyond the middle path of the Buddha. It's the soul's awareness, that the state of unconditional love, when you actually get a glimpse of the magnificence of actually what's there. And the breakthrough experience, when I do the method, I get you to ask the right questions to help you become aware of it. The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you're asking. If you ask the right questions to make you aware of both sides simultaneously of any perception, you'll get a glimpse of the real intelligence. And it is not a moral intelligence. It's not a, good and bad. There's no right and wrong. There's none of that stuff. Those are all tribal human inventions. This transcends that and is making sure that all living systems are evolving. It's really quite beautiful. I could just go for days on this one, because this is it was Leibniz. It was Leibniz, a German philosopher, said there was a divine perfection, divine beauty, divine love, and a divine order in the universe that few people get to know, but those that do, their lives are changed forever. That's the very reason why I put the breakthrough experience together, to try to give people a glimpse of that. If they get a glimpse, they really get a glimpse of that, their life won't be the same, and it won't be something they have to subordinate to and worry about, punishment in the afterlife or savior in the afterlife, any of that stuff. It's just a realization that there's a magnificence and they're part of it. And no matter what you've done or not done, you're part of it. And nobody can screw it up. You don't have to get rid of half of yourself to be part of it. And I'm just, you can know where I could go with this.
I know. Then Dr. Demartini, do you think that our lives are predestined, or do we have free will?
Well, this is a paradox that people who live in their immanent minds are stuck in. This has been asked for centuries, millennium, in fact. And there's a very simple solution. When you infatuate with somebody and you put them on a pedestal and you're conscious of the upsides and you're unconscious of the downsides, you minimize you and you're conscious of your negatives and unconscious of your positives, and you're conscious of their positives and unconscious of their negatives, and you put them on a pedestal. When you do, you inject into their life their value system as a superego, and you hear yourself saying, I should, I ought to, supposed to, I got to, I have to, I must. And you try to live in their values, and you can't live in their values because every decision you make is based on your own, not theirs. So the second you envy them and try to imitate them and try to live in their values, you're going to want to change you relative to them and try to live in their values, which you can't. So that's futile. And therefore, if you set goals that are based on that set of values you've injected, you'll think, well, I have free will to go and avoid what I don't want and seek that. But then when you find you can't do it, you're going to think, well, it must not be destined to be then. And you'll think divine providence is interfering with that, and there must be some sort of predestination that intends something other than what you're trying. And the same time when you resent somebody and you are conscious of their downside and unconscious of their upside, and conscious of your upside and unconscious of your downside. You're now too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you. You now project your values on them and try to get them to live in your values. And when you try to do that, that's futile. And now you're sitting there going, well, the more I try to do that, what I intend with my free will, because I'm trying to get, a better outcome, divine providence must not allow me to do it because I'm not getting the result I want. So anytime you're trying to, project your values onto others, it's going to be futile. Anytime you try to inject others' values into you and live by their values, it's going to be futile. And anytime you're striving for something that you're not getting, you're going to have this paradox between what I want, because I'm not striving for it unless I think there's better out there, and then I'm now not getting it, and so there must be something blocking me. It must be predestination. So then you have this free will and predestination, but most free will to the masses is avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, avoiding challenge, seeking ease, avoiding what I don't want, seeking what I want. And but there's another level, a higher level, which I think is true, solves this paradox. When you actually have reflective awareness, where the seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same, and you don't look up to somebody and put them on a pedestal and divide your full conscious and the conscious and unconscious halves, you don't look down on somebody and put them in the pit and divide your full conscious and the conscious and unconscious halves, and you just look across from them and you realize that what I see in them is me. In the breakthrough experience, when I do the Demartini method, I have them, I ask a question, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the specific trait, action, inaction that you admire or despise in them. And then where did you do it? When did you do it? Who did you do it to? And who perceived it? And you have to be accountable, 100% accountable, to own it quantitatively, qualitatively, where there's nothing to judge in them. And then the thing that you find that you're infatuated with or resent, you find the drawbacks of this one and the benefits of this one and level the playing field. And when it's level and you realize that what they're doing is nothing to seek or avoid or put on pedestals or pits, but something to just put in your heart, there's nothing to change in you relative to them. There's nothing to change in them relative to you. There's nothing to change. And now your will, the way it is, matches divine will, and the divine providence and free will are no longer in paradox. In predestination, they don't fight with each other. They're one and the same. And so only in a state of equanimity and equity between you and others, in a state of open-heartedness and love or soul, free will and predestination are one and the same thing. And the paradox is over with. So I ask people in breakthrough, when people come in, they have somebody that they, let's say, resent, and they have a story about them. And when they leave on Saturday night or Sunday morning, or then when they come back, I realize, how many of you realize that that story was bullshit? It wasn't true. And you had this story about them, and you were trying to avoid them because you resented them, and you've been trying to change them or get away from them. And so you're ending up having and the more you try to run away from them, the more you run into people like them. So it's this paradox of my free will is to avoid pain and seek pleasure. Well, so the masses in the anthropomorphic religions that are using moralities to impose free will and predestination say that free will is to avoid evil and seek good. But that's not real. That's not even possible. The Buddha says the desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is the source of human suffering. So when you finally realize there's nothing to avoid and seek, the infatuations that you seek have downsides, and the things you're trying to avoid have upsides. Just like if you have prey without predator, you don't have fitness. When you put the two together and balance them synchronously, there's nothing to fix. And there's nothing to pray to some anthropomorphic God to protect you, because there's no phobias, there's no philias. There's no fantasies, there's no nightmares. There's no seek and avoids. There's no prey and predator. There's just a balance, and you need both. And then you realize there's nothing to fix. Thank you. You're in a moment of grace. You're poised, you're present, you're purposeful. In that moment, human will matches divine will and predestination, if you will. And then you realize that you are designed to love. That's the predestination. You're designed to become aware of the panpsychic matrix of love that's there, that religions have omitted, anthropomorphic religions omitted, because they're stuck in a moral construct trying to avoid and seek all the time. So when they finally see the synthesis and synchronicity of opposites and transcend the judgment, you get beyond it. I have the opportunity to meet with a wonderful sheikh I'm having a conversation with in a couple of weeks, that I was watching a video of him, and he understood this. And a Jewish mystic scholar, Moses Maimonides or whatever, Maimonides, he wrote about this in his book in his work on religion. They understood this. Some of the scholars have known this forever, but the masses are caught in the animal behavior of avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. They're in survival. As long as you're in survival, you're going to probably be part of a very human, moral, value-structured religious construct with punishments and rewards. The highest level is just grace. And I believe that the true mystic in the journey, who sees both sides of things and realizes that both are necessary at the same time and are inseparable and entangled, like in quantum physics. When Einstein, Rosen, Podolsky in 1935 discovered quantum entanglement, or spooky action at distance, they broke through in the science field a major breakthrough in the realization that at any one moment when we measure something, the opposite is there. We collapse the wave function, become conscious of one, the other's there. And the reality is there, entangled. And I believe that any perception you have is entangled with its anti-perception, memory and anti-memory, content and anti-content. And when you finally see those synchronously, you realize that there's been nothing but love. Love's the balance of those two. And you realize that there is really a divine intelligence that's demonstrating love, that's helping us maximally grow. And we go and make artificial religions until we finally come up with that realization. And then we're in grace over the magnificence that's there. And then we realize that everybody's at different levels of awareness, and they need different scales and gradations of that awareness. And therefore, the various stages of religion on the planet. They're necessary. They're not evil or good. They're just stages of awareness. But the fullest awareness is opening up the bouquet of the realization that it's already in order. There's a hidden implicate order inside the apparent chaos of society, and that includes life and death. You know, we have this. The basic morality construct was anything that brought life is good, anything that brought death is bad. But that's easily refutable. In your body, you have mitosis and apoptosis, birth and death. You have build and destroy. You have anabolic and catabolic. You got parasympathetic and sympathetic. You've got fibers that are building and fibers that are destroying. You got osteoblast, osteoclast, neuroblast, neuroclast. Everything is building and destroying, remodeling to adapt to a changing environment. So the truth transcends the most constructs of morality, which is fear of death. And most of our fear of death is the fear of loss of the things we infatuate with, we're in pride of, or we're at fantasies of. And most of the fear of life is the things we're resenting, or the fear we're frightened of, or the things that we have nightmares over. And if you break through and dissolve the fantasies and the nightmares and bring things into balance at the same time and live acausally and synthesize it, there's nothing but love there. And to me, true religion is love. And I don't mean romantic love and infatuation, which most people confuse, and passionate animal love. I'm talking about a divine love that's, you're sitting in awe and you realize, wow, what a magnificent universe we live in.
And then Dr. Demartini, you know, if you don't subscribe to religion, you know, that much, but your kids get indoctrinated or get exposed to religion, how do you handle that in terms of, you know, how to educate them to have a different view towards religion?
Well, religion, I'm going to play it comes from ligare or lagat or ligation, which means to suture. I like to think religion is about union of opposites. And I've met people in various religions, most of the basic religions. I studied 3,000 different religions of 50,000 people, followers, all the way up to 2 billion people plus. And I've met people in almost every major religion and some minor religions that are more fundamental, more black and white, more right and wrong, and very rigid and absolutist, which are kind of new on the journey. And then you got others that are more aware, and they are very open-hearted and very aware, and they realize that whatever they see in others is inside them, and it's all a journey of love. And so I can't say that any one religion impedes or is limited to that religion. I think they all have a place. I've certainly been appreciative of getting the opportunity to study all of the different religions I've delved into. I've learned something from all of them. But I don't know if I would be a participant in only one of them. I think that there's something to learn from everything. It's like, I like to imagine that you had a mirror that once had the glimmering reflection of divinity, and some great master had this, but then it was vandalized and stolen, and then it was stolen from those people and stolen from those people and splintered over 1,000 pieces. And now all those pieces are in various sects of religions around the world, and each has got a little piece of the reflection. But if you put them all together and you put them together and synthesize them and put your hand over them and clean up the cracks, you get the glimmer of truth again. I think the panpsychic realization that there's nothing but love is the ultimate realization. But the other ones are all stages of development, and they all have a purpose. They all are stages. So I can honor it, and each is a path of, the path through which to understand this mystery, you might say. But I wouldn't want to say that it's only this tribe versus that tribe, because I think I don't think that the divine limits itself in language or location or to a group of people. I think that's a little bit biased myself. But I think that, I've met highly aware individuals from many different faiths or religions. And so I have great conversations with many of them. I'm having the opportunity to meet with a Jewish mystic coming up. I just got invited this morning, actually, to meet with a Jewish mystic and now an Islamic mystic in a couple of weeks. And I've met with Buddhists, and I've met with Christian mystics, and I've met with all kinds. I've learned something from each of them. And I've also seen areas where, like myself, they probably see areas that I can't see, and I can see areas they can't see. So we're all on a journey. I think it's wise to not think that it's done. I think that no matter how much we know, whatever we know, there's obviously more that we don't know. And the vastness of what we don't know is far exceeding what we know. And so, this is my level of illusion up to this point. Give me another 10 years, I might have another illusion on top of that. But but from what I can see, the synthesis and synchronicity of all complementary opposites, the dialectic synthesized, has been one of the great learning tools since the time of Zeno and beyond. And now we have the ability to get to an acausal state and synthesize those synchronously with the Demartini method, which I think is the next step beyond the dialectic. So I think that religions are a vehicle. All the religions are a vehicle to get to understand a deeper and more profound nature within.
And Dr. Demartini, I want to discuss a bit. A lot of religions you develop shame and guilt because of the dogmatic rules that's that they subscribe to. Can you give us practical tools how to deal with the shame and guilt that we get from our beliefs or religion, so called?
Well, the more narrow the mind, imagine the Earth from the core of the Earth out to the lithosphere, through the core and the mantle and the lithosphere, and then out into the outer atmospheres. The farther you go, the broader the mind. Then the farther you go in, the narrower the mind. The more you go in, the more judging and rigid and dense and concrete your thinking is. And the more you go out, the more rarefied and, you might say more expanded the awareness. And there's an overview effect as you go out and expand, you look back, it's hard to judge. You see a bigger picture. And people that have a broader perspective are less likely to jump to conclusions about right and wrong. If you study consequentialism and utilitarianism, you'll realize that nobody really knows the consequence of any act. So to arbitrarily put a moral structure on something is not really understanding all the repercussions of it. And we can easily go and identify and, claim that this book or claim that this individual, was God derived or whatever, but that's not easy to prove. That's just a belief system, and people have faith in it. But the more I do it, I really don't know the consequences. I mean, when 9/11 occurred, if you wanted to go and probe on the advantages and disadvantages of 9/11 occurring, I guarantee you, if you looked honestly, objectively, you could find a balance. There's things there was jobs that were created, there was opportunities that were created, there were people's lives that were saved, there were heroes, there's also a villain, and there were deaths, there's funerals, there's flower companies that boomed, there was reconstruction and building and architectural design companies that got flourished. There's cemeteries were in business. I mean, I could show you the pros and cons and make a list, an exhaustive list of thousands of benefits and drawbacks all coming from one event. And so I can't state that event is good or evil, but I can state that there's an event there, and we can state the facts. But to label it as either good or evil, you have to narrow the mind and block out with a subjective bias. Our animal nature and our amygdala, as I said earlier, has false positives, and it errs on the false positive in order to protect itself from predator and to try to capture prey. And so anytime we're not living by our highest values, where we're objective and we're expanded and our space and time horizons grow, and we're more narrowed in mind, we get more black and white and absolute in our perspective. And those are very rigid individuals. I had a lovely lady that was in South Africa that asked me, where I was mediating a conflict between an Israeli leader and a Palestinian leader. And the lady said, Dr. Demartini, this Israeli leader, she said, do you believe that there's absolute evil? And I said, no. She goes, well, I do. And I said, you do? I said, okay, so you believe there's absolute evil. I said, so I'd like you to define and write down what you think is absolute evil, or who somebody is absolute evil would be. And so she said, and she was really angry with this man, and she wrote down this man who was the opposite side, a Palestinian guy. And I said, okay, write down the name. Okay, you don't have to share it with anybody, just write down the name. Okay, so this is an absolute evil person. Yep. Absolute evil, all evil. Yep. Pretty narrow-minded. All right, now go to the what specific trait, action, inaction do you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that you think is absolute evil? And she said, well, this the trait that I dislike is they're basically rigid and opinionated, and they are intolerant, basically. And I said, okay, they're intolerant and they're rigid and they're opinionated. Okay, now I'm looking at her and I'm seeing her do that right on the spot, but she's not seeing that she's doing that. She can't see it. She's subjectively biased, seeing it in him, but not seeing it in her, and it's kind of a absolutism. And I said, okay, now that we've got the trait, we now know who the person is, the individual is that you think is absolute evil. Now go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating this same or similar specific trait, action, inaction that you thought was absolute evil, intolerant. And she first said, well, I don't see any, I'm not intolerant, I'm very tolerant. She wanted to brag about how tolerant she was. I said, well, now And I gave examples of when I've been intolerant. I don't think I go a day without intolerance. I sometimes get intolerant at the airport. I get intolerant at the hotel. I get intolerant with food in restaurants sometimes if I don't get what I want or don't get it in the speed I want it. I have moments of intolerance all over the place. And I listed a bunch of examples of when I did it. And I said, I certainly have moments of intolerance. And then she goes, oh, well, okay, in those cases. And I made her go through and identify, I think, 31 examples of when she was intolerant. And then calmed it down, and she kind of got humbled and got a little tear in the eye, and she realized, oh, crap, I'm intolerant too. And she had to admit it. And I had her make it and admit it until she saw it to the same degree she saw in this guy. And at first, she didn't think he was the other way. Then I asked, where is he tolerant? And then go to examples where he's tolerant. And we found tolerant examples where he was very tolerant in different things to people that were more in line with his values. And then I asked, what's the benefit of go to the moment when and where he's intolerant? How's it benefited you? And then she realized that her job and her career and her identity came as a result of his intolerance. And she has a following and she has a book out and she's noted for that. And she kind of goes, whoa, that intolerance actually served. And when I got 39 benefits to the intolerance, she got humbled and she said, wow, I didn't even realize that that actually is serving me and it's not a bad thing. And I said, now, do you still think it's absolute evil? She says, no. And I said, it never was. You just chose to narrow the mind and not take the time to ask the right questions, to awaken your full consciousness, to see a broader picture, to see past it. And now you're avoiding it as an animal, avoiding predator and seeking the opposite, prey, and only seeking that which is unavailable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable. And you're trapped in your own paradox. And she got it. And she was very aware, and it was very lovely to see her awareness wise enough to get past that and realize that this guy was just a human being. And then what's interesting is the guy that she was then labeling intolerant came up to me and said, God, I could have sworn you were talking about me. And I said, we were. He goes, wow. He says, that was a lot lesson for me. I was thinking that she was that way. And they both had this illusion. And we go around and we have sometimes such biases that we don't take the time to see both sides of things and then don't see them at the same time. And then I took this lady all the way through until she saw the very opposite behavior that was going on at the time he was playing that role. And then she realized that the more people are tolerant to her, the more intolerance was balanced. And she saw them synchronously, and she had a tear of gratitude. Now she's getting to see a broader perspective. And the morals that people get caught in many times are so black and white, so rigid, that they're missing out on the obvious. And I think to me, true religiosity transcends that. But false religions or stages of religious awareness start there and then eventually migrate past that and transcend that and realize the real divine nature, which is love. And love is a balance of opposites. It's not a romantic passion. It's a balance of opposites that are synchronous. Anyway, I could go off on that.
Dr. Demartini, we've got a lot of questions coming in on the side in terms of you mentioned the breakthrough experience. How can they experience what you've explained or during the webinar?
Well, the breakthrough experience is my attempt to give people a glimpse of that soul, you might say, that divine nature. It's not a religious program. It's not designed to be a religion. I'm not a religion. But I do believe that inside the human being, when an individual is perfectly equilibrated and in a state of grace, they can have a spiritual experience doing a scientific method. I don't believe that you have to be. I don't believe that science and religion have to fight. I think they're the same thing. True science and true religion are saying the same thing. It's accessing the pairs of opposites at that moment. So in the breakthrough experience, I'm doing whatever I can to help people get a glimpse of that. Because in that state, they're in a state of equanimity. That's where they have the greatest awareness in the mind. That's where they have the greatest creativity, innovation, genius, awareness. That's when their mind has the least amount of noise. That's where they have the strategic planning and executing plans and desires and seeing things in a magnificent master plan. That's also in business where they have the most equity and sustainability in business, because if you're judging people and not listening to your customer, you don't sell. And if you're putting them on pedestals, you'll sacrifice profits. You don't have fair exchange. And when you're in finance, if you can't manage your emotions, don't expect to manage money. And you're going to be all over the place with money, and you're going to end up depreciating yourself, living in judgment. So many people have an idealism they're trying to live by, beat themselves up when they don't do it, and then feel shamed, and then they wonder why they can't be empowered. And then in relationship, people want to be loved for who they are. They don't want to be put on pedestals or pits. And then in leadership, true leadership is knowing how to communicate what you value in terms of what other people's value. And your physiology is creating symptoms with autonomic overlays unless you actually balance out your mind. A perfectly balanced mind dissolves the symptoms. And disease is just a feedback to let you know that you haven't got a balanced mind. You're not pursuing what's really valuable to you. You're not objective. You're not sitting there in a state of grace, which heals. That's why I say that gratitude and love are still the greatest healers on the planet. So almost every area of life is impacted by the method in the breakthrough experience. And I teach people how to take the emotions that they have in their life and integrate them. Anytime you have an emotion, you have an incomplete awareness. You're ignorant of something. If you're infatuated and drawn to somebody and attracted to them and you're hooked by them, you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides. They run you. You have an imbalanced perspective. You run externally. You're going to give credit to something. And if you're resentful to something, you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. And now you're basically going to want to blame them and get away from them. And you're externally driven. And people that are externally driven look for, they blame something as a little devil, and they look for saviors to save them on the outside instead of go inside and realize that that's just misperception. And the truth of the individual, like I explained in the breakthrough, is that they have both sides. And you honor both sides in them and both sides in you. There's nothing to be seeking or avoiding. There's something to be present with. You love the person. And this is all the things that you think are challenges dissolve. I've yet to see a challenge that can't be dissolved in breakthrough. It's just a matter of taking the time and working and doing it. I give them the method. I give them the tools, the questions to ask. If they follow it, they can dissolve it. They can transform relationships. People that sometimes are resentful to people, that's because they're too proud to admit what they see in them is inside them. They're not owning it. They're projecting their values onto them. They're not knowing how to communicate the values. They're resenting them because they're not living in the person's values that's projecting. And they're sitting there expecting a fantasy, an unrealistic expectation on that individual to live in the other individual's values. And this undermines relationships. So I show how to dissolve those infatuation, resentments that undermine relationships. Well, the moment you do, you go back into your executive center, and the executive center of the brain is connected to your visual cortex, 5 and 6 area, and you see a vision. And people are waiting for this mystical vision, but all it is basically prioritizing your life and living by your highest values, and you get it. And the more you do that, the more you get clear on that, and those with the vision flourish. Those without a vision perish. Your amygdala won't give you that vision, but your executive center will. So if you're living by highest priority, which I explained in the breakthrough experience, how to live by priority and how to structure your life that way, you can have a spiritual experience living by priority and empowering your life and having relationships and go and empower all 7 areas. The breakthrough experience is about empowering all 7 areas of life. And whoever does that automatically exemplifies it and acts as a leader to other people. And you get to be a leader in whatever area. I'm a leader in human behavior, and that's specialty of mine. But everybody has an area that they can be the leader, and it's whatever is their highest value is. If they prioritize their life and do, they get more objective and they get more able to see both sides synchronously. And they're not avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, avoiding predator, seeking prey. They're embracing life as it is. And life has 2 sides. As C.S. Lewis has said, and Anaxagoras has said, life has 2 sides, pain and pleasure. You're not going to escape one for the other. You're going to get both in life. And I'm interested in empowering all areas because I believe that any area of your life you don't empower, somebody's going to overpower you. If you're not empowered intellectually, you're going to be told what to think. If you're not empowered in business, you're going to be told what to do. You're not empowered financially, you'll be told what you're worth. You're not empowered in relationship, you'll be trapped in a relationship you want out of. You're not empowered in social, you'll be told propaganda that's irrational. You know, you see that on all the CNN news and Fox News and all these newses. Then if you go and if you don't empower yourself physically, you'll be told what drugs to take and organs to remove. If you don't empower yourself spiritually, you'll subordinate to some anthropomorphic religion that'll promote some narrow-minded religious morality that's not universal, but it's just tribal, that's basically giving you these rules that you're supposed to live by that you can't, which creates a hypocrisy and internal conflict and guilt and shame, and then a dissociation from that to live in a fantasy of aggrandizement in some afterlife instead of embracing the magnificence of what we have right here on this planet. And the embracing of that and loving that is what allows us to transcend and expand our game and to have the immortal part. I believe that I wrote a book called the Secrets to Immortality on trying to have the awakening of the immortality in all 7 areas of life. That's what I'm trying to do in Breakthrough, trying to help people awaken an immortal effect in all areas. I want to have ideas that stood the test of time, went over and lived beyond my life. I think I've succeeded in doing that. I want to have a business that lived beyond my life. I did that. I want to be able to have money that lived beyond my life. I've got that. I want to be able to have kids that live beyond my life. Well, I learned how to do that, and I got beautiful kids at doing that. I want to have a social impact, and people remember me beyond my life. I think we've got that in books and different people we've impacted. And I want to have a physical body that went beyond. That physical body that I have right now is, I'm 65. I'm still cranking. I still got more energy than most people. But eventually that body's going to turn to dust, and it's going to go through its cycling processes. But my inspiration and my spiritual aspect, the part that's love and wisdom, can carry on. That's the immortal soul. In the old biblical statement in Corinthians, it talked about the spiritual celestial body. That is the body that's left its impact in the minds and hearts of people through time. That's in the image and remembrance of that. And I believe that we can get all those and empower all of them. And that's what Breakthrough's for. Breakthrough's my attempt to do something extraordinary with people's lives. Because people play small. They think in terms of, what business should I work for to be secure? What school should I go to be able to be intelligent? What religion should I be part of to be part of the in crowd or tribe? What sport team should I follow? And then you fight with the other ones, like the gladiator game. I'd rather go out and ask myself, what international business do I want to? What spiritual movement do I want to found? What social cause do I want to create? What international business or international college do I want to create? I'd rather play from a different perspective. And Breakthrough's for that. And by the way, Breakthrough is not for just everybody. I want to rule that out. I don't want people coming there. I had some lady the other day that came to the program, and she said, well, I thought I was going to jump up and down and listen to music and feel good. I said, you need to go to some other program for that, some other rah-rah session for that. That is not what Breakthrough's about. It's not for people that just want to, feel good and get immediate gratification and jump up and down on chairs and go rah-rah. It's for people that truly want to master their life and want to get in there and learn the principles that stands the test of time. Because I basically spent 30,000 books studying the greatest minds in history, trying to summarize them to save you an enormous amount of time in the journey of mastery. And there are principles that will stand, and they will be useful, and they will work. But you got to follow them. And it ain't easy. It's not fun. It's not a fun joy session to sit there and go, oh, my God, you got to face yourself. Courage means heart. And people can go and walk on coals, and they can jump bungee jumps, and they can walk on ropes and things like that. And they think, well, that's great courage, and that's a great metaphor. But there's nothing there that's as powerful as you having the courage to be yourself and having the authenticity and the audacity to walk a path that stands out instead of fits in. That's where Breakthrough is. So people that want to do something extraordinary, want to originate something original on the planet and empower those areas, that's what the principles and methodologies that are sitting there. And it's not for everybody. It's not an easy, lighthearted thing. It's 26 hours with me going and exploring how to master your life. And it's for people that really, 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 really want to do something amazing with their life and not just sit and fantasize about it and feel good temporarily and then beat yourself up at the end with regrets at the end of your life. So pardon me for going off on that, but I want to make sure I don't want somebody coming there with a false understanding. I don't want them to come there, comparing it to these other programs that are out there, that it's not the same. This is my life's work that I'm talking about here. And I'm interested in empowering. And I wanted to exemplify all 7 areas and empower all of them. I didn't want to just sit there and talk about it. I want to live it. And I want people to want to live that path. And it's not for the masses. It's for people that want to master their life. So anyway, I could go off on that for a couple of days.
Thankful that Dr. Demartini, and for the people that we said, serious about wanting to master their life, we said at the beginning we're going to have an offer for you for the Breakthrough Experience. So what we've put together is a Breakthrough Experience Accelerator package. So that is where you get to spend 2 days with Dr. Demartini at the Breakthrough Experience live with Dr. Demartini, and with that you also get a 12-week Breakthrough Experience Accelerator course. So that's after the Breakthrough Experience, you get 12 weeks follow-up program where it's an online program that you can also work on that. And then you also get access to the private invitation-only Breakthrough Experience graduate community on Facebook. So that's all the people that's already attended the Breakthrough Experience. That's a community there that keep on mastering and developing their personal life. And then also you get Dr. Demartini's #1 selling course, the Inspired Destiny program, that's valued at $400. And then also with that, you get a one-on-one priority power assessment with one of our consultants that you get to work through that. So the whole package is worth $4,541. But if you click through now on the offer, you'll see on the right-hand side, you can click through on that. It will take you through a page where you'll see where the breakthrough experience is happening, and then you'll get exclusive discounts on that offer for you. So please do go see what the final price is. Go and click on the offer, or on the country you would be interested in attending, and then go and see what the offer will be. But you'll get everything included in this offer with this us tonight on this webinar. And if you don't see the link on this side, you can see if you're maybe on a mobile phone, you'll see on the screen there's a link, a bit.ly link. You can write it down and put it into a browser. You'll see the link is the bit.ly/BTE20. If you put that into your browser, the registration page will come up for the breakthrough experience. And then also, if finances is a challenge for you, please just go to our website. There is somebody that will help you there on the chat line that can put a payment plan in place for you. So please don't let the finances stand in place for you in your way of joining us for this breakthrough experience with Dr. Demartini. So please go follow through on that. We would really love to have you on the breakthrough experience when the next one is happening nearby you. So Dr. Demartini, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I received some really, well, I do it almost every day. I get them sometimes 2 to 5 a day, sometimes more, sometimes less, letters of people that have been to the breakthrough experience. And, occasionally you get people that go, well, it wasn't matching what I wanted, but usually because they have false expectations. And that's why I just said what I said, because I don't want people coming there looking for rah-rah.
Yeah.
But I've seen some profound transformations in people's lives. If I sat and I read to you some of the transformations, it'd blow your mind. I mean, the owning the traits of the greats portion, this week I've gotten letters from people that have been doing that and the impact it's had on their life and expediting the playing field that they get to play in, who they get to hang out with, the opportunities that they get to do. I've watched my life, unbelievable opportunities. I mean, phenomenal opportunities come in my life because of that method. And I teach that in the breakthrough experience on Sunday and Saturday. But I've seen people that have had already been successful in business. We had a lovely actor that's very successful that just came and applied and is now incorporating this work and expanding their director, producing, and acting career. I've seen people in sports expand. I've seen people in business expand. I've seen people in relationships dissolve conflicts or find relationships. I've seen almost every imaginable thing in the 7 areas of life enhanced by breakthrough. But it's work. And I don't want to mislead people into thinking that, it's just you just spectate. It's not a spectator program. It's a working program. It's not something that's just going to be rah-rah me speaking the whole time. You're going to be working. But I guarantee you what you're going to learn, you'll be able to use the rest of your life. The one methodology, after 47 years that I've been working, 47 friggin' years I've been working on this method. I believe it or not, I found a way of empowering all 7 areas of life by this one method. And I don't emphasize that enough sometimes in the program, and I just take it for granted sometimes because people, I just assume they get it, but sometimes I have to remind them what you're doing. I have to show them the link of how each of the 7 areas of life are empowered by this. And once I do, they just sit there and they're quiet and they get it. And then they realize, now I know why I want to get this method mastered. So come and learn the method. That's worth the program. I have people coming to Breakthrough numerous times, not because they failed it, but because they want to incorporate it and make sure that they go and use the method over and over again to go to new levels. Because, people go, well, am I going to be happy? Anybody looking for happiness is living in La La Land. It's not about happy. It's not about, avoiding sadness and seeking happy. It's about embracing life in the support and the challenge and the positives and negatives and the perils of opposites you face every day. And it's about getting past that illusion of one-sidedness. And it's about embracing both. That's where the power is. That's where meaning is. That's where inspiration is. That's when the greats come from. The leaders are those that pursue challenges that inspire them. And the followers are those people that are trying to avoid challenges that despire them. And one leads to profound accomplishment. One leads to banging your head against the wall, expecting a one-sided world. So all I can say is, please just come. If it resonates with you and you're not looking for La La Land and quick fixes, if you're coming here for a mastery of life, I can save you an enormous amount of time. I've spent 47 friggin' years of my life working on this work, and I know there's no way you can go through life and not. I ask people on Sunday, how many of you have gone through and learned something this weekend you could have gone your whole life and I feel certain you would not have learned? And every hand goes up. So I say, look, just save yourself an enormous amount of time. Join me for the experience. It is an experience. You won't see life the same way, and you'll learn something you can use the rest of your life. I promise you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Demartini. I just want to reiterate the offer that we have put together for you. And this offer is really to help you to get the most out of the program, because we know how much, how valuable it is for you, to be able to go through this. And it's also, it isn't just the breakthrough experience on the weekend, it's also what you do afterwards and still, putting in the work and still mastering the work to master your own life. So that is the breakthrough experience with Dr. Demartini, the 12-week post-breakthrough experience online support course that you also get with your booking, and also Dr. Demartini's number one selling online program, the Inspired Destiny, that you can get starting to work now before you attend the breakthrough experience, and also afterwards that you can also work with that. And then also the 1 hour life priority power assessment with one of our consultants, where we help you to find out what is important to you in your life, to see where you're currently at, to see where you want to go, and see what's holding you back from you getting there. And then with the tools that you've learned at the breakthrough experience, you will be able to dissolve that and help you to empower your own life. And then you also get access to the community on Facebook, where there's people from all over the world, all Dr. Demartini students there, where we exchange wisdom and we also learn how to master our life further. So please, if this is for you, please click on the link below, or follow the link, the bit.ly link below, and or talk to our team online on our website, that they can help you with a payment plan, or you can book on to the breakthrough experience at nearest closest to you. So we really look forward to having you at the next breakthrough experience, and Dr. Demartini looks forward to sharing this once in a lifetime experience with you. Thank you for your time, Dr. Demartini.
Thank you. Thank everybody who's listening in, and I look forward to seeing you as soon as I get to see you, and wherever I happen to be around the world. Thank you so much.
Thanks for everybody for joining. We really look forward to having you again on the next breakthrough experience, and also the next webinar that we do live on once a month. Thanks, Dr. Demartini.
Thank you.